Hey, what's up, everyone? We are super excited to announce that we will be making our first appearance on the road in Simpsonville, Kentucky, July 28th and 29th at the Called to Freedom Conference. If you are disentangling your faith after experiencing a hyper-fundamentalistic or a legalistic church group, this event is for you. There will be panel discussions, table discussions, inspiring testimonies, all from Christians who have rebuilt their faith, and even a game night, guys. It's a weekend of rebuilding theology, rebuilding community, and rebuilding faith through God's word. So definitely check that out. Also, Jerry and I, we're going to be speaking there, and we're also super excited to meet you in person. You can register for the conference today at bereanholiness.com/conference. That's BEREAN holiness.com/conference. Also, until May 31st, you can use the promo code Cultish in all caps at checkout for $50 off the purchase price. We hope to see you there. Now back to the episode.
All right, welcome back to Cultish, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jeremiah Roberts, one of the co-hosts here. Very super excited for this interview. We are here. First of all, I'm joined always with Andrew, the super sleuth of the show, coming from Harriman, Utah. We are joined in 2 different states, but actually 3 different states because we are connected with Yeonmi Park. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Yes, very, very, very excited for this episode. I normally kind of get the conversation going, but I actually want to go ahead and hand it. So Andrew's my co-host. I'm based in Arizona. You're in Utah. And so you are in New York, right?
Yes, I am in New York.
Awesome. So Andrew, I'm going to let you ask sort of the first question to kind of just talk about. We're talking about just really your story, current events, your book, which both Andrew and I have read, While Time Remains. I think it's an excellent book. A lot of great things I really enjoyed. But Andrew, I'm going to let you start the conversation. What's the first question that's on your mind that you'd love to ask Yeonmi in this interview?
Yeah, really for our listener base, just in case they don't know who you are, can you give us a brief introduction of yourself, what you're doing right now in New York, like what you're involved in, and then some backstory of your life, because it's extremely important to get to know who you are and how God has placed you and the things you're doing today.
Yeah, I was born in North Korea in 1993, and I was growing up there believing that I was living in a socialist paradise. However, by the time when I was 13 years old, we just couldn't simply find any food to survive. So at 13, I escaped North Korea with my mother. And as soon as I got to China, we were human trafficked. So they sold myself and my mother separately as sex slave. And after 2 years of slavery, actually, my mother and myself got rescued by Christian missionaries from South Korea. And they told us how to escape from China, which means walking across frozen Gobi Desert into Mongolia from China. So I survived the Gobi Desert, and almost when I was 16 years old, I made it to South Korea. And I came to America roughly 8 years ago to study at Columbia University. And that's when I was waking up to the fact that the ideologies, in some Marxist ideology that was happening in North Korea came to America.
Yeah.
And now I wrote that book to wake up America, and I am fighting for human rights, and especially trying to let the world know that there are 300,000 North Korean modern slaves in China.
Yeah.
And people often don't realize that the slavery never ended, and it's happening, and I'm trying to hold the Chinese government accountable for their crimes.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Yeonmi. So the very first time I ever heard of you is when you were on the Joe Rogan Experience. Yeah, so I had to be fully honest, when you were first really telling your story of day-to-day life, I mean, my jaw had dropped to the floor. I mean, I'm 40, I'll be 42 in April, and I think the entirety of my life, kind of different income, levels in, kind of like good, plentiful, and, abundant, but I've never skipped a meal like ever in my entire life. I've taken that for granted. So I think there's so much gravitas that comes with that. But a question I have for you, I'm looking at a post right now by someone named Tim Kennedy. He's an Army Ranger. He's He's in the military. He's also was an MMA fighter. But he has a post, and on this post is an aerial view of both South Korea, North Korea, and China above it. I'm looking at it right now. We might post this on our YouTube video. So on the very bottom is South Korea. There's lights everywhere. North Korea is completely. There's only a few lights, and above is China. Could you maybe just zoom in? Because I know we're going to talk about your book, While Time Remains, but I think it's really important for our audience to really understand day-to-day life for you up until you were 13 years old and what that typically looks like. Because a lot of people just don't truly understand. Can you, that's the zoom out picture. Can you just bring us into that? Explain to us a typical day for you in North Korea when you were living there growing up.
Yeah, in that picture, as you can see, that even in the 21st century, North Korean people don't have electricity. The only places that had electricity was in Pyongyang, capital where Kim Jong Il lives, and then few monuments around the country that Kim's had on. And as a day-to-day as a North Korean, it's really depending on what class system you're in. So this is often people don't understand about North Korea. It began with the idea of equality of outcomes, that's everybody all equal in a communism and collectivism. Once government, abolished private property, abolished all the people's rights to own anything, what they did was they divided North Korean people into 51 different classes. And North Koreans are same genetics and homogeneous nation. We speak the same language. So, but these 51 classes were basically purely upon on what your ancestors did. So what my great-grandfather did during the revolution, communist revolution, was a landowner, was a capitalist, was an intellectual, was a, communist. And depending on what he did, our status gets determined when we are born into the society.
Hey everyone, sorry to interrupt your programming, but this episode of the podcast is brought to you by stagsconsulting.com. Are you a small business owner or entrepreneur? If you are, you know the different hassles and headaches that come with trying to keep up to date with your accounting, bookkeeping, all that sort of stuff. Kyle and Sherry, they specialize in helping to deal with that, to take away the stress, the headaches, the uncertainty, to make sure you are fully compliant, and they have a lot of other services available. If you want to check them out, go to stagsconsulting.com/cultish. They would give you a free consultation for listeners only, and go ahead and check them out. Again, stagsconsulting.com/cultish. Definitely check them out. Back to the episode. So this would be kind of like the caste system in Hinduism or like in India, where you're just born in a certain sect and there's no way to really get out of it. Is there a similarity? Is there a way when someone is in these different 51 classes, a way to get out of that? Is there a way to redeem themselves for the sins of the past? Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but what are your thoughts on that?
So there's no way of getting out of that. So North Korea, if you marry somebody, like let's say the girl is a lower class and guy is a higher class. When you marry, what happens is you don't marry up. The entire guy's family goes down with the girl.
Yeah.
So that's how they prevent people mixing with each other. And so you only go down, you cannot go up. And it's similar like right now in America where people say, oh, you are guilty, you are privileged. I have a son who's half white, and people saying like he's like privileged and he should be like white gift. And like that, like when North Korean being born, we don't choose our ancestors. Yeah. So it's not something you can redeem or you can change. It's like your grandfather did that, and therefore this is your life from now on.
Yeah. And Andrew, what questions do you have just about day-to-day life in North Korea? What's in your mind that you'd like to ask Yeonmi?
My question would be for Yeonmi, just to flesh out that class system a little bit more. What did the regime qualify as being bad that puts you in the lowest class that your ancestors did? I'm trying to understand just specifically, what were the sins according to the regime that put you in a lower class?
So if you kill somebody or rape somebody or steal somebody, those are not very serious crimes in North Korea, especially raping. And those crimes are not even a crime. They don't have a concept of rape there. However, those most serious crimes, what they call is political crime.
Mm.
That is where your great-grandfather was a landowner. Like he had a tiny land in his garden, or
Yeah.
he was a capitalist. He had a factory before the revolution, or
Mm.
he was working with South Korea or Japan.
Yeah.
So the worst crime is the ideological crime. If they
Mm.
were not pure peasant communists, that's the worst thing you can be. So
Yeah.
the people literally the threshold to ending up in North Korean prison camps and getting executed is like a somebody like there's a newspaper on the front page. There's a pictures of dictators, right? And you didn't
Mhm.
see that, and you saw the bag and you tear down that page, and that's a crime. You get executed, and sending your 3 generations of your family end up in a concentration camp.
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah. Let me ask you this too. When did this all start? When in just the history of North Korea? I mean, I know, like I remember when President George W. Bush was president, and he started talking about North Korea. At that time, it was Kim Jong Il, and now Kim Jong Un is in charge of North Korea. Did this start with Kim Jong Il, or was it previous to that? Like, when did this really start? In like how long ago was this when this takeover happened, where the promise was given that they're going to get people full? I know I've heard your talks about they were promised square, I think like 4 square meals a day and provide food and shelter. They give their property. When did this take place?
It began with Kim Il-sung, the first king, the grandfather, and in the 1940s, like 45, 48, when when the World War ended, when World War II ended, and Japan left Korea. They were colonizing Korea for 3 decades, and they left Korea. So there was a group in the South that was backed by the US, that was Lee Seung-man, and there was a Kim Il-sung in the North who was backed by Mao in China and Stalin.
Yeah.
So there's two governments came together, and then they put this line like 38 pillar there. So North chose to communism first, copying Mao and Stalin's version of communism, and South Korea copied the American version of a free market democracy.
Yeah.
So I mean, we know which system wins eventually, right? North Korea is a perfect example of testing ideas. We
Right.
divide a country that had same people, same genetics, same IQ, I mean, tradition, culture, everything. And then
Yeah.
let's give them different two sets of ideas. And one became the, country of K-pop and Samsung. One became a darkest country in the world.
Yeah. And so when you were, when you came to America, I know you talked about how you were studying so much, how you almost you weren't even eating, you weren't even sleeping because you just had that much, you just wanted to learn, which I really, really admired, both in your interviews and you talked about that in your book. I think that's been a motivation for me. Like, I need to make sure I'm studying as well too. Do you see... Have you studied other communist dictatorships like the Soviet Union, or you think about just other places where it's been fascist? You think, well, there's Mao. You think about the Soviet Union, Cuba, Fidel Castro. Have you studied those groups, and what similarities do you see, and what differences do you see when in comparison to North Korea, how communism was ran there?
Yeah, I think the things I saw, Cambodia, Vietnam, right, Venezuela, and Cuba, of course, the Soviet Union and China. I have studied some of those examples for sure. And the similarities is, of course, whenever governments take the control, they mess up everything they touch.
Yeah.
They are not very efficient system ever. Even though they try, maybe they start with good intentions, but it always ending up the bureaucracy, the corruption, the exploitation of the workers. So that it seems like the same theme happening, but other countries, I think, was not quite able to take it to the isolation that North Korea chose to do.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
for instance, North Koreans don't even know the existence of internet.
Yeah. So
And
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, so one thing I actually finished watching. Have you ever seen or heard of the series Chernobyl on HBO
Yeah,
about did you
yeah,
see that?
yeah. I have seen that. I also read the
Yeah.
book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just watched that series with my wife. I finished up the series last night. When you watch
Mm,
that, because I mean, it's talking about this nuclear disaster that happened in 1986,
mm,
and you kind of see in that series both the seriousness of the radiation accident, but you also see just the prominence of what it's like to be in a place where the state was in the where people are all part of the collective.
mm.
But what I noticed maybe a difference was that everyone there seemed to be well fed and well clothed.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
significantly different from your day to day life with
Mm.
what that was like. Can you explain people what that's like as far as the food scarcity and what was that like for you growing up?
Yeah, I guess it's when you grow up in North Korea, the first thing you learn is really looking for food.
Hmm.
And there's a reason for that. When people left starve, that is really the only thing we are going to think about. Like in North Korea, if we eat breakfast, of course we skip lunch, but we are worrying about how are we gonna find dinner to survive.
Hmm.
And once you find the dinner, you're like, how are you gonna find food for tomorrow?
Yeah.
So I grew up eating grasshoppers, and that was actually fancy protein to get only in the harvest season. They don't Grasshoppers are not like 12 months of the year they're around.
Hmm.
And also like dragonflies in the summer. And the North Korea we call spring a season of death
Hmm.
because you have a harvest and you might maybe dry the vegetables and survive in the winter, but
Yeah.
they all run out. And by the time of right now, this time, end of March and beginning of April, we don't have really eat plants to survive. So
Mm.
this is where actually most of mass starvation happens during this season.
Yeah.
So, it's like seeing dead bodies that die from starvation is like looking at a tree, that's how normal it is for North Korean people. Just look at them and in the morning you wake up and you go around the train station and they go in a cart and just put the dead bodies like sticks when you are dead, and a while it becomes like stick. You are not like you cannot move. So you just pile them up like big sticks and they carry them away.
Wow.
And this is like daily life.
I mean, there's so like here's one of the things in all transparency, and Andrew, I'm gonna let you jump in here in a second. Like hearing your interview both on Lex Friedman and Joe Rogan,
Mm,
you gave both examples of this. I think here in the West, we are so sometimes isolated from death. You think like a
mm,
car accident happens where there's a fatality. First responders come in, that's a good thing, but they clean up the mess, they get everything out of the way. And we're given so much. You know, you're in New York, so you think about Times Square and there's
mm,
so many lights and things flashing and excitement in the air. But I think in some ways we're somewhat isolated from the reality of death, like
mm,
here in the West. Like I don't know. I'll just tell you a story and maybe get your thoughts on it. Andrew, I'll let you jump in here a second. Like I remember, I was a couple years ago. I was driving home from work and I saw a fatal accident on the side of the road, and I saw someone who more than likely was alive 30 minutes prior. They were dead. They were
mm.
pinned in the bottom of the car. I had PTSD for about 3 weeks just seeing that. But you, on the other hand, this is something that you just saw like on a regular basis, like as a young child. And you, like, I just, and it was just, this is just so normal for you. I mean, at what point ever was it like, this was not okay for me to see this? Was this when you got to Korea, when you got to South Korea, to the United States, where eventually, because this was normal for you? Like, does
Yeah,
that, go ahead.
so that's the thing. Like in North Korea, they deny humanity to the point they don't even teach us what empathy or compassion or love is to the people.
Yeah.
So growing up in North Korea, actually, I never thought you had to feel compassion for people who's dying. Simply just because it was too many, and also it could be just easily you, you know?
Hmm.
And so I don't think I remember when I came to America, I was writing my first book and my agent was telling me that I need to get a therapy, like go see a therapist for my PTSD. And my question was like, what's a therapy? What's PTSD? It's not
Hmm.
a concept
Yeah.
for North Koreans. So it's a of course, it's a great concept and then it's a great thing. PTSD is real, but
For sure.
when you live in that kind of world, you don't have a luxury to get traumatized. You don't have a
Wow.
luxury to fear things. It's just survivor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
Andrew, what questions do you have, man?
Yeah, when I'm thinking about North Korea and the United States, or even like North Korea, the Soviet Union, Yeonmi, what do you think is the fundamental presuppositions behind the worldview, right, of Marxist Leninism and in North Korea that leads to this type of life where there's people dying from starvation? They're not seeing value in the individual human, because here in the West, we would say that our modern West society is built on presuppositions that are given to us that are rights from God, right? That we're made in the image of God, that we're worthy of dignity, life, respect, and the pursuit of happiness, things of that nature. Like, what are the fundamental presuppositions of communism that led to a life where there's starvation and death?
So you mean the examples of what's happening in America that is resembling to North Korea, or?
What I'm asking is, what is the worldview over there with the communistic worldview that leads to death and suffering? Like, what are the fundamental presuppositions behind that worldview? Like, is there a God? If there is no God, is it atheism? So there's no life, no value. Therefore, you can do what you want to others in order to exact what you want from them. Like, what are some of those presuppositions that led to communism?
I think it begins with a lot of things. I think in order to kill this many people, I think there got to be a lot of horrible ideas in it. I think one definitely I can see is not respecting individuals. Like in North Korea, all these propaganda slogans we have to say and memorize that, as an individual, you don't matter. You matter on your own ways, like when you're in a part of big collective. So, the one needs to learn sacrifice for the big collective good. And that's how they teach us. So therefore, you're not going to have any respect for human life, right? Because the only thing that matters is a big collective.
Right.
And not only that, the other ideology is about destroying the meritocracy. So in North Korea, if you want to be a dictator, the leader, it's not about you become competent, understanding the policies and gonna run for election. Your father needs to be in the bloodline of Kim, right? And even being a doctor, being a farmer, being a scientist, all of that is purely based on a bloodline. Or what would they say, like, do you have the oppressor blood or you have the oppressed blood? So people getting elected to power position in decision making, they are very dumb and stupid and very ignorant. So when it comes to farming, I think it happened in the Soviet Union. Because our dear leader said this, it's gonna work. This is a communist way. And of course, it's not scientific at all. So that horrible decisions when it comes to farming, economy, healthcare, does kill most of people who are in the bottom. And the last idea, I think that what is very, very horrible is that, like what you said, they become gods themselves. They kill gods. Like what the first thing the North Korean regime did when they came to power was killing all the Christians. And if you ever read a Bible or if you ever met a Christian, that's how you get executed. So they remove all other competing, I guess, not even either competing, God or ideas, and then they become God themselves. And that really kills people's ability to understand truth and think critically. So I think it's like, yeah, really, but the thing is, right now in America, they claim the same idea of equity. It's not about competence and meritocracy. It's all about how can we be equitable. Let's hire this many women, this many gender of different transgenders to become a pilot. Like you just want somebody who can fly the plane very well, right? And this is how it all begins.
How is Kim Jong Un viewed? And also, you think of Kim Jong Il, the similarities. are they viewed as sort of a divine figure, like a savior, like a Christ-like figure, where he is the ultimate savior? Everyone they're the ones that must be looked to, or how is Kim Jong-un viewed?
So I escaped the time of Kim Jong Il. So, I don't know how people really think about Kim Jong-un. Then I
Yeah.
meet people that come out of North Korea these days, and I ask them, like, what
Mhm.
did you think about Kim Jong-un? And of course, they think that he's the son of God, right?
Yeah.
And when I was in North Korea too, I literally believed that they were gods. They could read my mind. They have supernatural powers. They can move the mountains. And like exactly copy the Bible telling us that their body dies, but their spirit lives with us forever.
Mm.
And when we die, we join in Minnesota's paradise. So they are definitely gods to North Korean people.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in your book, I want to maybe bridge a gap between your original book, which is also incredible. I listened to that on Audible and also, read your book. I want to kind of connect two areas of maybe like the classrooms. So we'll get there in a moment. You had issues in your class when you're studying here in the West, but that started with your classroom growing up in North Korea. Can you explain like what a day was like for school? And our podcast, we're Christians, but we specifically focus in on cults, also mind control, undue influence, and the pressure to make sure you think a certain specific way. Take us into a typical day for school, because this isn't just typical education, which you saw that when you came here and started studying, hopefully almost to your detriment. Thankfully not, because you're here talking with us. But take us into what it's like to be in a classroom in North Korea when it comes to specifically state propaganda, indoctrination. You might even call it brainwashing. I'm not sure the terms that you would use looking all these years later. Like, take us into a typical day in class for you, and what was that like for you?
So when you think about North Korean classroom, just think about it as an indoctrination camp. I remember first thing we go to the school, first thing we have to is bow in front of the portraits of Kim Jong Il and Kim Il Sung and Kim Jong Suk, their wife. And then our teachers would tell us that the most important father that I have is not my own biological father or mother, it's my dear leader. The most honorable thing that I can do as a human being is dying for the revolution of the party and my dear leader. And even though the food that I'm eating, that my parents worked so hard to give that food to me, the first thing that I need to do is not thankful to my parents. I have to be thanking the dear leader every meal that I eat.
Wow.
Dear leader, thank you so much for this food. Every meal you do. And then we started classroom by singing the national anthem about how we're going to be being royal and giving our lives to the mother nation. And then we have to study memorizing so many useless dates about how many Japanese imperialists, how many American bastards got killed by Kim Il Sung and Kim Jong Il. How they made little rocks into bullets. And like one I remember at a math classroom, my teacher was asking me what's 1 + 1? I said 2, and my teacher said you're wrong, because my dear leader discovered at a young age that if you add 1 drop of water to another drop of water, it becomes bigger one.
Yeah.
It's not 1, and that's how he proved that math was made up by the white man and racist, right?
Yeah.
To control people. So of course they go against all common knowledge and common sense. But then once that around noon comes up, then that's when we need to start our labor.
Yeah.
So even you are 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old child in school, you are revolutionaries before you're being a child. And it's not even a concept of being a minor. So we have to bring our work clothes. So we have to go helping the farmers in the collective farm, helping the dam in the workers, and we go to factory and work. We go to railroads and break the rocks, and all sorts of work around the year. So that's so school is more like in the mornings we learn propaganda, afternoons we be the free laborer for the regime, and we work for free, and they don't feed us.
Hey, what's up, everyone? We love that you are enjoying our content on a weekly basis, but this program cannot continue and wouldn't be possible without your support. So if you want to go to thecultistshow.com, there is a donate tab. You can either support us one time or you can become a monthly partner with us. That will allow us to continue this program, allow us to continue to be salt and light to the kingdom of the cults. So please go to thecultistshow.com/donate and you can support us one time or monthly. Also, make sure you check out our merchandise store. Go to shopcultish.com. You can see all of our great designs. A lot of you have gotten merchandise from us already. So again, you either go to shopcultish.com and check out all the awesome merch. Back to the show. You mentioned earlier, and also you've mentioned to another podcast that you were lucky if you were able to find, a grasshopper or a caterpillar on the way home. That's some extra protein for you. Did you, when you found those and say you ate one of these bugs that was actually plentiful for you, which is not normal for you, did you feel inclined to immediately thank Kim Jong Il for providing for that food? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it was not plentiful, and
Well,
I'm
yeah,
still like below 80 pounds. I don't think I
yeah,
will ever overcome of that,
for sure.
you know, the malnutrition that I suffer. Like most of
Mhm.
North Koreans are on average 5 inch shorter than South Koreans because of severe malnutrition that we have.
Yeah,
But I do get to say that even though I was eating these horrible, disgusting bugs to survive, I was always grateful in my heart for the dictators,
hmm,
and I respect them. And the happiest memory that I have from North Korea was that the time that I had a dream, and in my dream, Kim Jong Il came to my school and to show us, and that made me so happy. And I woke up in joy, And was
yeah.
whenever life was hard, I was thinking about that dream. So
Okay.
of course I was completely brainwashed
Wow.
despite that.
Did you ever see the movie Jojo Rabbit?
Mm-mm. No.
Okay. There is okay. Well, there is very interesting just because it's about somebody who grows up he's like a schoolboy who grows up in Nazi Germany, and and
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it's very like it's kind of funny. It's kind of like a dark comedy, tongue in cheek. But there throughout
Yeah.
the movie, this young boy, this Hitler shows up as his imaginary friend, and I think that the film
Oh,
is done in such a way to show just how Hitler was sort of living in his head rent free because of all the propaganda and talking about how he was a Führer and the state is the savior. So yeah,
wow.
yeah, you should check out that movie. I definitely would recommend
Yeah.
that.
What's it? Jojo, what's the name of it?
Jojo Rabbit. I think it got
Jojo
nominated
Rabbit.
for a couple
Okay.
Oscars a couple years ago. I would definitely check out that film. Andrew,
Okay.
I'm gonna let you jump here in a second.
Yep.
So I'm in Arizona, and like human trafficking, I think that's a
Mm.
huge. It's an epidemic everywhere across the world, even here because we have the issues with the border. That's always been a prominent issue. A lot. Our pastor, our church, we've actually ministered to people who've been victims of sex trafficking, and it's so heartbreaking. Um,
Mm.
and there's a lot of just so much gravitas to your story. So as we kind of transition sort of towards your journey towards the West, which is going to go towards your current book, While Time Remains, talk just a little bit about your escape from North Korea and how that was involved, and you escaped with your family. Remind me again, or just kind of bring us into that part of your story, if you could.
Yeah, I mean, so you mean how I escaped or
Yeah.
the story? Yeah, so as I said, by the time I was 13, we were really in a bad position. Somehow it was getting harder and harder finding food. So my sister, who was 6 years old, escaped first,
Mm.
and she left me a note and saying like, if you go find this person, she's going to help you to go to China. And I found the note, and I went to find that lady with my mother that morning.
Yeah.
And then when I found the lady, she said, "Oh, if you go to, I can help you to go to China, and your mom can come too." And she said, "If you go to China, you're gonna meet your sister, and they will have food, and I will help you." But
Mm.
thinking about it now, like there was a reason why somebody was helping me.
Yeah.
And there was a reason why she was doing that, but it didn't occur to us that to ask why she was helping us. But in some sense, it didn't really matter. Even if she said like, I'm gonna sell you to Chinese, I don't think I had chose not to go. Because if I stayed behind, I mean, there's 1,000% guarantee of me dying from starvation within that week.
Yeah.
So we crossed that frozen river, and of course, first thing I was seeing in China was my mother being raped right in front of me. And then they told us that we had to be sold as slaves. And the reason why they were selling North Korean women in China was because of the one-child policy that was implemented by Communist Party in China, that they made people only have one kid, and therefore they aborting way more girls than boys.
Yeah.
So now there are a shortage of 33 million women for this 33 million men who cannot find wives.
Yeah.
They are the main customers of buying North Korean women as their, supposedly just a sex slave.
Andrew, what's in your mind? What questions do you have?
Yeah, so with that one-child policy creating a lack of women in China because they're murdering babies in the womb, is China obviously isn't they're not unaware of this selling North Korean women into slavery from China. How does that relationship develop between North Korea and China? Because it seems like North Korea is kind of dependent upon China. So is China therefore then taking advantage of North Korea and taking some of their women in a sense, like not, I don't know, like how does that dynamic work between the two governments? It's very odd to me. I'm just trying to understand that.
Yeah, so North Korea's main sponsor is China's Communist Party, right? North Korean regime cannot survive even 1 week without CCP. And but their relationship is a little bit of bittersweet. So China wants North Korea to be one of their like those regions of Xinjiang and Tibet, theirs. They want the North Korea to be part of China. And every day they are doing that. I mean, they are doing that in so many countries in the world, especially North Korea. They go as like, why don't you guys lend us this mine for 200 years? And they lend this town for 300 years and 50 years of lease they get from North Korea. But imagine after 200 years, like it's of course theirs, right? So that's how they go. They don't say we're gonna invade you and take your land. They're like, I'm gonna give you this much economic support and defend you in the global international stage. So why don't you give us this much for like lending us lease, right?
Yeah.
So they lease so many things from North Korea. And when it comes to defectors, the Chinese Communist Party actually don't want North Korean defectors. They actually bring these girls from like Burma, other countries for the Chinese men to marry.
Wow.
North Korean defectors, they don't want it because when we are in China, none of North Korean women want to be in China, right? Like, nobody want to be trafficked and then live as a sex slave. North Korean women all want to go to South Korea or like Japan, like Canada, America, UK. There are many democratic countries accept North Koreans as refugees.
Yeah.
So Chinese government had made a promise with North Korea that if they catch North Koreans, they're gonna send them back to North Korea.
Yeah.
Because Kim Jongun doesn't want defectors to go out, like me, become a spokesperson and expose the regime.
Yeah.
And that has been a very hard for Kim Jongun.
Yeah.
So they are like at every level trying to control defectors.
Wow.
So China actually captures defectors if they find the police and then send them back. And that's why we are being vulnerable. So human traffickers know that we cannot, even they rape us, even they kill us, we cannot go ask police for help.
Wow.
Because if we ask police for help, I mean, we are literally sending Jews to the Auschwitz, right? They're going to send us back to North Korea and kill us.
Yeah.
And most painful death you can imagine. So these traffickers, they find opportunity in that vulnerability. And that's why they are set us. And North Korean women cannot get help from authorities.
Yeah. I have a question too, just about understanding China and its relationship to other countries. Like I think overall, and you can let me know, I think communism is an overall worldview where the state is the savior. You see it manifest itself sort of differently, whether it's the Soviet Union as depicted in Chernobyl or North Korea or China. A couple of years ago, John Cena, who's the WWE wrestler, I'm a big pro wrestling fan, by the way, so I kind of, I might have watched a few of his matches, but he kind of became a movie star, and he was doing a world tour for one of the Fast and Furious movies, and in it, he one of his tours, he called Taiwan a country. He later had to do a video. He did a video. He didn't have to do it. He chose to do it, saying that I love and respect China and the Chinese people, and I am very sorry for my mistake. And his mistake was identifying Taiwan as a country, which, I don't know. I was kind of baffled by that because, John Cena, I've always saw him as like a very pro-America, pro-support the troops. So I could just tell there's something underlying that I think maybe defines the Chinese government. I don't know. From your perspective, like, did you see that happen, or what's your opinion on that, on his response, and what does that say about the Chinese Communist Party?
I think it says more about what's happening in America, the moral decay of American minds.
Yeah.
And of course, like that's why I also wrote my book. In my book, I talk about how I met all these movers and shakers, and then people talk about the Black Lives Matter and slavery is wrong, and racism. All of those people, I've been asking them, like, this actually true horror is happening that you can actually make a difference on.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody's saying if the Holocaust was happening, I was alive at the time, I would have saved Anna Frank.
Yeah.
I would have been different. And I'm telling them, yeah, it's happening right now. Well, what are you doing? And they're all trying to make money. So, of course, that was completely disgracing this man who grew up in freedom, who's been benefited by this free democracy, do not defend this truth and being like bow time to this horrible regime.
Yeah.
But he was not only one, right? Like NBA stars. Hollywood, academia, and politicians. I think it's everywhere in America right now. The people who are hijacked, the institutions that were hijacked by Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah.
And will not speak up and stand up and holding Chinese government accountable. And I think it's a real problem. It's a complete threat to our country. And I think it's very scary because there's no morality. It's nothing matters to these people other than just making some money for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Andrew, I'm going to let you jump in here a second, but I think I remember it was a while back when they were filming Mulan, the Disney remake of Mulan. And I think there's a camera shot where they show the set of the movie, and literally in the background, you can see basically I don't know if you call it like a concentration camp or a internment camp, like literally in the background. It's stunning.
Yeah, for the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, and Disney denounces all sorts of hate, and they say we go against all the hate and all of those things. But when it comes to China, they're okay with anything. So the hypocrisy of American mainstream culture, I think that I was not understanding. I did not expect that was happening here.
Yeah.
And now I see that every day more and more, and it's completely heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm. And Andrew, what's in your mind?
Yeah, what do you think, Yeonmi, has led to this decline of morality in the United States of America, where it's focused more, people are focused more on money than they would say their neighbor? I would think that in order to truly love your neighbor, you first have to love God. Like when I think about the 10 Commandments, the first table of the commandments is love God, and then what follows is love neighbor. My thought would be that what's happened in our society is that we have people that are fundamentally denying the very foundations of what makes other people matter, right? Being made in the image of God, freedom even mattering because it's a right given to us from God. When the Son sets you free, you are free indeed. 1 Corinthians 7 states, when you're called, if you are a slave, set yourself free if you have the opportunity, which I find that's what you did. So praise God for that. You found yourself a slave and set yourself free, and you have a beautiful story that shows God's providence all throughout your life. But what in our nation, which was built on the backs of Puritan faith, is happening so that people are living in America yet denying the very foundations that give us the reason to pursue freedom, life, and the pursuit of happiness? Like what's going on here today that's leading to communism influencing our culture so heavily?
Yeah, I think I had to think about Christianity a lot in the last several years, and especially when my son was born, and that's when I saw a miracle, and
Yeah.
I became a believer. I mean, how can you not after seeing that,
Yeah.
right? But I think that's the thing. It's like if people don't understand that freedom without virtue, it's anarchy. And in America right now, it's anarchy. They say I have a freedom to shooting myself with heroin on the street in New York City, in San Francisco. And what is a freedom? They have a right to kill themselves and harming other people. So sort of, right? But I think that virtue came from God. And when you don't believe in God, the danger is that you believe in anything. And that anything is a lot of times is very scary things.
Yeah.
So I will not, assume that if you don't believe in God, you're gonna believe in bad things. That's an automatic assumption. But there is a complete danger to the society when people choose to believe in everything, and that's very scary society to be in. So I think this is where I keep thinking now is that, of course, I support legal immigration in America. As an immigrant myself, I became American like last year. But when Americans I keep saying somehow, as this is a slogan, they don't even question, they don't even think. Somehow they keep saying diversity is our strength. And it's scary. Like diversity is, I feel like the commonality, the common value, that's what the strength is. It's not just everybody look different, everybody thinks different. That's gonna be a strength. And I love that diversity of opinions, but there still has the common thing that we choose to believe in, we choose to defend, right? There should be a meaning in that. And when the nation completely divided in what is matter in life, what is important in this country, even this country is important. And I think that's why it is so brilliant on government part. They chose to divide people. In North Korea, they made us not trusting each other, even our moms and our children, because the first thing my mother told me was that birds and mice couldn't hear me. So she told me not even whisper. So when you don't trust each other, what happens? You're gonna trust the government. And that's how they come and control your lives. And I see that every day. Like when I was so amazed when I came to America in the first, it's like how much people were so trusting. Like you get into Uber and you somehow think that just Uber driver is not gonna carry you, right?
Yeah.
You order pizza and then somehow you think that so nobody put like poison in it.
Right.
And society works beautifully when there's a trust. And that trust is getting destroyed every day.
No,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I believe 100%. I think like social media, for example, is a huge blessing. I mean, the fact that now like I could hear you tell your story and was the Joe Rogan Experience, was that the first interview you ever did on that high a level when you were on there?
Yeah. I have interviewed with Dr. Peterson,
Yeah.
and of course I left before that, and then like I think Joe Rogan interview really made a lot of Americans to hear my story.
Yeah. So So my question would be is that, I mean, you grew up in a communist society where if you said anything outside the confines of what the state wanted you to say, there would be severe consequences. Your life probably would have ended. What does it feel like? What did it feel like to be on Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, to really express yourself on that magnitude for the very first time, really, aside from maybe some social media comments and the YouTube comments, but to express yourself fully without consequence? What did that feel like?
It's amazing. Actually, before that, I spoke at TED and I like the other more like mainstream platforms. I mean, Joe Rogan is mainstream, but
Yeah.
it's like, TED is a little bit different word. And And I think it was, I mean, the beginning when I was speaking out, it was a miracle to me that like when people telling me you have a right to criticize your own present. And in the beginning, I was horrified. Like, why would you do that? And I was like, this is like true freedom. You
Yeah.
have right to criticize your own leader,
Yeah.
right? And everybody is equal, and especially the governments are the people's servants. We hire
Mhm.
them to fight for our rights. It's not like we work for them. In
Right.
democracy, that is the opposite. Like we are the ones that have all the authority, and we hire the politicians to represent our interests.
Hmm.
So for me to understanding that for the first time, and somehow you are not gonna get killed even if you criticize your present.
Yeah.
And of course, I exercised that right quite many
Hmm.
times now, and it's still shocking to me that this is a norm.
Right.
And where I grew up, like that was not a norm. You literally, they come after 8 generations of your family if you criticize your own leader.
Hmm. When you first came to America, and Andrew, I'll let you jump in here for a second. What was have some fun here. Like, what was the most surprising thing off the get-go? Was it the amount of food? Was it just the diversity of people? What was initially the most culture shock thing coming to America?
It's like, of course, there are millions of culture shocks that I felt, but what shocked me was the abundance of choices that individuals get to have.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I associate freedom with choice in the beginning. Like
Hmm.
I went to grocery store. I went to like Walmart in the beginning. That's the first place like they took me when I came to America. And of course, like there's a size of chips like was half of my body, like so big, so much food. But when I went to like pick up apple, I mean there are dozen different apples. Like for me, apple was apple one type. And here there's like the crispy honey gala, like so
Right.
many different types of like apple. I was trying to pick up the toothpaste and there was like mint, whining, completely all in one, like dozens of toothpaste, right?
Yeah.
And then like whenever I go to restaurant, it's like in North Korea, I never seen a cookbook because we don't have ingredients to make different types of food. We just put everything whatever we find that day.
Hmm.
And here you have choice to eat that day. It's like different types of food, like fish, meat, vegetable, and pasta. So I was like so overwhelmed. Like,
Hmm.
how do you make a decision? And
Yeah.
I was seeing my American friends, like they were like loving the choices they were
Hmm.
giving. You know, they loved all having all the options. They were not getting overwhelmed by that at all.
Hmm.
And for instance, for me, to choose one for me. Like whenever I go to a restaurant, I was like,
Yeah.
I don't care, just give me something. I like everything, you know. So even ordering food it took a while, like at least 5 years for me to adjust, and even learning some menu was a work
Hmm.
because I never knew that types of food existed, so I did not even know what they were, so I couldn't even order it.
Right. Right. And also, one of the things you did talk about, maybe you can elaborate on this because I mentioned it earlier. You had this almost unhealthy obsession of just studying and learning. I don't know if it was maybe making up for lost time. Like
Yeah.
what prompted you? Did you start studying right away when you got to America? Was there kind of like a motivation for you to start that? And yeah, kind of take us into that. Like when did that all start for you as far as just the studying, wanting to go to school and just to learn? Because you had to do a lot of catching up to bring us into that.
Yeah, it really began when I got to South Korea, and that's really for the first time I was safe in my life. You know, not every guy I was seeing was trying to rape me, and I was not running away from police and authorities and human traffickers. So at almost 16 years old, I got to South Korea, and I heard this place called the library. And that was my dream place, right?
Yeah.
There's so many books in library you get to read, and I was reading like 100 books per year while I was studying at the university. So for me, it was as I just knew how much I did not know, and as you learn more and more, like you know how much you don't understand too, right?
Yeah.
As you learn more and more, it's not like helping you to think I know now. It's like, oh my God, I did not know this much. Like every
Right.
time, that's how you realize it.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, still till this day, I'm terrified at how much I don't know and how ignorant, how dumb I must be. So I
Hmm.
think that paranoia is making me very hungry for the knowledge and the truth.
Oh yeah.
So especially reading the Western classics that really opened my eyes and helped me to think critically for the first time.
Hmm.
So it's now seeing this new generation in America of TikTok and Instagram and don't ever pick up a one book of Western like classic books.
Yeah.
And
No.
no wonder this country is like, collapsing right now.
Hmm. Oh, definitely. Andrew, what questions do you have just about like the library? I know, like, just for me too. I'm from the '80s. I feel like I'm an '80s kid. So oh my goodness, I loved libraries as a kid. I was just so overwhelmed with like all the different books, like all of
Yeah.
that. And this is even pre-internet, so we actually you had to pull out the giant thing with the files, where like the alphabetical, to find out whether books were there. So like I'm very much that was very old school for me when it when it came to libraries. But anyways, Andrew, what questions do you have for Yeonmi right now?
Yeah. So real quick, when you were in South Korea, is that when you started reading the Western like classics?
Yeah, I read that's until like so in South Korea when I got there, besides all the culture shock, they were telling me that everything that I believed in my life was a lie. It's like scrap everything that you know about the world and everything you were taught in North Korea. That's all lie. And I was thinking, so everything that I believe was a lie, then how do I know what you're telling me is not a lie? I just
Hmm.
could not trust ever again. I could not believe anything again. And when just one day in the library, I picked up this book called Animal Farm. It was a tiny little book, and I thought it was like about animals, right? And reading George Orwell's 1988 Animal Farm and 1984 afterwards, that's when I really truly understood what happened to North Korean people, what
Yeah.
happened to me, and learned about this system. And that's when I really trusting now, okay, like that was a brainwashing, that was a propaganda. And that helped me to open the eyes to Western classics. And
Yeah.
I was reading Bastia, The Law, the John Stuart Mill's like The On Liberty and all other books.
Yeah. What
Wow.
was?
So
Go ahead,
so
Andrew.
hold on, real quick, Jerry. So you're in South Korea. You're reading these Western classics. You're reading George Orwell, and
Mm.
then you come to the United States and you want to continue your education. You end up going to Columbia. And I would think, coming from South Korea, you're like, I'm going to Columbia. I'm going to learn so much more about the giant of Western civilization. But when you end up in Columbia, it's almost like you're going backwards in time to North Korea, where you're learning about bloodline issues that are now distorting the way that people view the world. Like, no more. It's like, well, George Orwell, that's white privilege. You know what I mean? Like
Mm, mm,
things of that nature. There's a section in your book. I want to read it to you real quick just to see if you can flesh it out a little bit more. It's
mm.
from While Time Remains, page 30 into 31. It says you're talking in regards to Columbia. It says a safe space in this context presumably would mean a place where ideas could be expressed without fear of reprisal. Instead, it meant a place where, to invert the phrase popularized by Ben Shapiro, feelings don't care about your facts. I started to despair that my new institutional home would not be a vehicle to search for truth, but the opposite, a
Mm.
cult.
Yeah.
Can you flesh that out a little bit? Like, what was it like? You think you go to this like Ivy League institution to learn more, but instead they're actually almost trying to brainwash you again.
Yeah, I remember the very first orientation, and my instructors were telling us, how we need to stay woke and be woke. And I was like, I'm awake. I did not understand woke was a different thing. And she's like, okay, like let's give you examples of, being woke. And what would that be? And she was asking who likes to read Jane Austen. And of course, I raised my hand. I mean, it's beautiful literature and it's way more complex than just romance, right? And she was saying by reading Jane Austen, that's how you get brainwashed because she was living the era of white colonialism and she somehow depicts in her work is that only white men are capable of logical thinking. So she propagates those ideas and therefore that's how you become racist. And that's how society were so systemically racist. And that's how we need to stay woke to find those examples and look for those, bigotry. And I mean, I come to the heart of the West where these beautiful Western classics should be celebrated. And
Hmm.
now they're being denounced as the sign of bigotry and racism. So And then, of course, not even that. Like before every class, the professors would send these emails to us, trigger warning emails, where today in this classroom we are going to cover this topic. If this triggers you in any way, don't come to the class. You don't even need to tell me. Don't do the reading, and you don't even need to tell me why this triggered you. I'm like, why on earth are you going to Ivy League school and paying this much money if you cannot handle reading something in an AC nice classroom? Where it's not like the bullets are hanging out, like it's not unsafe. Literally, most safe campus, there are air conditioning on you and the food on you. Everything is safe, and then you cannot handle reading some words.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's when I thought this civilization is dying. It's a I don't think I will ever understand why the professors are forcing people to become like these snowflakes that
Yeah.
who are incapable of handling any kind
Mm-hmm.
of difficulty in life and making them almost a handicap, not
Yeah.
physically, but emotional handicaps that cannot tolerate any kind of pain in life.
Hmm. In George Orwell's 1984, you remember the popular segment where I believe the main person in the book,
Winston.
yes,
Mhm.
is forced to
Yeah.
admit that I believe 2 + 2 = 5.
Yeah.
What did
Exactly.
when you first read that? How did you process that when the very first time that you read that? Just kind of given where you came from.
I was thinking, oh, this is how North Korea made. They read 1984 and they copied it. And
Yeah.
I was reading book. I mean, this is North Korea. And I was thinking, this is how they made the complete dystopia. Like, it's not they just copied the book.
Right.
And they made the reality just like that to the North Korean people. And I was amazed how somebody did not live in North Korea, did not live in Georgia, where, as far as I believe, wrote it in the later 40s or 50s, right?
Mm-hmm.
He did not get to see North Korea in the 80s, 90s, and predicted that in advance.
Right.
And somehow humanity learned nothing from him
Mm-hmm.
and still repeating the same mistakes.
Right. And maybe I could connect something together. Remind our audience again, what was the equivalence that was made about mathematics in North Korea? I think of that one. What was the issue with 1 + 1 = 2? Or what was said about that then in North Korea?
Yeah, it's like the Kim Jong Il as a child, he learned that if you add 1 drop of water to another drop of water, it does not become two, it becomes bigger one.
Mm.
So that's why 1 + 1 is not 2, it's 1.
Right. So you see a similarity there. And what I want to connect this to, and this directly relates to your book, which again I definitely recommend. It's an excellent read. While Time Remains. It's available right now, pretty much on Amazon, any of your favorite publishers, wherever you buy books at. Here's a connection. I just pulled up an article from the Scientific American. Here's the headline. Here's the headline. It says, "Modern mathematics confronts its white patriarchal past. Mathematicians want to think their field is a mediocrity, but bias, harassment, and exclusion persist." So what you're beginning to see, and there's several other articles that state, math is racist. Almost like a redefining of, 2 + 2 does not = 4. I don't know. When you see articles like that, and you've seen a lot of those, like what comes to mind? Because it's definitely, you do kind of elaborate on this in your book.
Yeah. I mean, it's the exact same thing at Columbia. They say, oh, SAT is racist because, Asian kids do so well on it and Latinos and other kids are not. So they say, exam is racist. I mean, there's drinking milk is racist. Eating meat is racist. I mean, literally, at that point, it's a destruction of any kind of truth and common sense. And it's that the fabric of the communist society is always that they have to attack the truth. So people don't understand the truth. And because truth works, right? But if all lies, they don't work.
Yeah.
So the West, what shocks to me is that North Koreans don't have internet. They cannot Google things and understand the truth. But in America, with this many books, with this much like internet access and knowledge access, people still be able to get brainwashed to this degree. I think that's what's shocking to me.
Yeah.
That, like people are still capable of being brainwashed to this degree with all that resources available to them.
Yeah.
And why the importance of education and importance of, what school that our children going to. Because it all begins from their classrooms and from their teachers. And I'm a mother myself now, and every day, I'm so sorry, like first time I'm talking about this, like my son is like 4 when he was now 5, even 4. One day comes on and I asked him like, hey, like now we play toys, can you clean up your toys? And he was saying, oh, that hurts my feelings, mommy. And I'm like, how on earth did somebody tell you what, like hurting your feelings? And of course I did not like, it's his teachers doing that.
Yeah.
Right? Like nobody in our family ever saying that it hurts my feelings, ever.
Yeah.
It's not a thing for North Korea to even talk about.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, oh my God, like already at 4, the brainwashing began.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't it amazing? I mean, you're a mother and you have a son who's 4 years old. I mean, does it baffle you just how, and Andrew, you've got 4 children. Does it ever just baffle you sometimes just how perceptive children are of the world and how much they take in around them? Like, what's it like viewing this through, like, now you growing up in Korea, but now just through the eyes of a mother? Bring us into that if you could.
Yeah, I think children are so impressionable and they are very imaginative. Like children believe in, Santa Claus. They believe in magic, right? They believe in Spider-Man. My son thinks that Spider-Man, his neighborhood, is their best friend. Like so imaginative. So of course they're gonna imagine all sorts of stuff, and I'm not gonna validate all this like imagination, right?
Yeah.
And like one day my son was like asking, oh, can I be a girl? And I asked him like, do you think I can be your dad? He's like, no. Okay, I don't think you can be a girl. And that was the end of the conversation. He never asked me, can I be a girl?
Yeah.
Right? And it's just like telling them a common sense a lot of times works. And I think in North Korea, like parents, of course, like we all get brainwashed, but in some sense, still like, the biology, still like men and women is a true thing. It's an actual thing there, and we still care about some sense of facts over feelings. Like in America now, everything is about how you feel. Right? How you feel, that's your truth. Like at Columbia, everybody, this is my truth. This is my lived experience. Therefore, this must be like overriding the facts.
Yeah.
And
maybe
this is
Oh yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead and elaborate on that. But I was just going to ask you real quickly. Did you have a thought? Did you want to finish? I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was saying that like even North Korea didn't go this far.
Yeah.
I think that's what I said. Even North Korea is not that this crazy. I don't think they believe in there's 10 different thousand genders, right?
Right.
So in some sense, the West kind of expanded.
Oh yeah.
In a way, yeah.
Like it's just interesting because like I think this whole idea, for example, of just the gender confusion and the pronouns, this was not even existent 5 years ago. The very first time I even heard of this was when Jordan Peterson came to prominence, when I saw the video, I think it was of someone else filming him when he was just a professor at whatever university it was up in Canada, where this conversation, and I was still not even understanding what they were wanting. And now this is everywhere, where people now in Fortune 500 companies might, if they don't identify somebody by this certain, Zer or pronouns, like you could lose your job. And this has happened in such a short amount of time. It's really mind baffling to me.
Yeah, that's the thing, how fast a society can collapse. It's hard to build things. It takes time to build things.
Yeah.
Destroying it's very quick.
Yes, I'm sure you know that being having a son.
Yeah.
So where do you think this or when do you think this began in the United States, right? The communist infiltration. Because if I'm thinking about like Marxist communism, I'm thinking about the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, right? Like the proletariat wanting to overthrow the bourgeoisie. They gain class consciousness to then overthrow the working class, overthrowing the elite. There's always a strategy, right? Like in North Korea, it was like Juche was like the type of strategy that was unleashed on the people and then create that class system. Like, how does this begin in the United States? And what is the strategy that is being used in order for these people, let's say, woke people, for example, to gain this class consciousness to then want to overthrow the existing social structure, the political structure that we have?
In the US, to me, is a bit unique is that the people who believe in this like gender, like 10,000 different like genders or this stuff are the people actually privileged people. They are usually college graduated white labor people. I'm sorry to say that I don't think I ever meet someone from like Vietnam refugee and Cuban refugee come here have even time to think about those things. They are learning English for the first time. They're trying to make things work in this new country. So it's a luxury belief you can afford when your life is very good. And they use this to almost control the majority of people. I don't think it's actually suffering, workers are rising up to overthrow the, capitalists. It's like that.
Yeah.
It's in America, they are borrowing this like, we are oppressed. Of course they are not oppressed. I mean, my friends at Columbia, wearing this like $100 yoga pants on their green juice detox. They are not oppressed. But they are using those slogans to gain more control in the society. And I think gain more power. Whenever you say these slogans, right, your status goes up, you're more popular, and more people kind of follow you and respect you, and you get a better job. And all these companies now have diversity hiring, right? They have to have a quota, like North Korea. It's like they have the quota of like, we need to hire this many people for this role who are gay or transgender, women of color, blah, 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 blah. So it's almost like a tool they are using for their personal gains.
Yeah.
And they are already established class in America. And that's what's shocking to me. The people who complain they're oppressed and America is horrible, the people who are precisely being benefited by this current system, like AOC, like Bernie Sanders, right?
Yeah.
They are rich, they are famous, they are popular, and they're all day long telling how America is oppressive to them. And then the actually people who come from oppressed world, they are grateful for America. They will die for this nation. And they are so, yeah, I think that's what people don't understand in general.
Sorry for interrupting your currently scheduled programming, but did you know you can go to apologiastudios.com and become an all-access member? With all-access membership, you get exclusive content from all of Apologia Studios productions. Not to mention, Cultish is an Apologia Studios production, so you'll get access to Cultish, The Aftermath, where Jerry and I talk together after our most recent series, discussing what we thought. It's really cool. We have a lot of fun doing it, and, we can't do this without the studio. It keeps the lights on. And we can't also do this without you. So please go to apologiastudios.com and become an all-access member. Now back to the programming.
Another question I have, maybe you can kind of blend this in together, because you have several books that came to mind. Both of you mentioned your book, and I'm going to mention another book in a second. But also, George Orwell had another book, Animal Farm. I'd like to get your thoughts, Yeonmi. Could you maybe just, for anyone who hasn't read it, describe what the summary of Animal Farm was, and how do you see the Animal Farm manifesting itself now in the United States? I'd love you to elaborate on that and get your thoughts, because I know that was one of your favorite eye-opening books in your whole journey that you talk about in your book.
I know, thank you. So let me try my best. It's been some time.
No pressure.
So there are animals who live in a house. There's a master who's a human being. And the animals thought they were oppressed because, there's a master, and of course, the master is not always perfect, and they had to work in the master's house to get food. And so they thought, okay, if we get rid of this human guy, we can be the, in charge, and we can divide everything equally, and we take care of each other. It can be a complete utopia. Everything is fantastic. So they do get rid of this master who was a human with walking with 2 feet. Once this animals remove him, and the revolution succeeded, right? And the pigs who were the one in charge because they were able to, I think, ride and think better than any other like cows and other animals. So, and then once these guys come to power, they in a way becomes a lot worse than this human master.
Mm.
And then they keep changing the slogans, once you like animals, we don't sleep on bed, but now later they like sleeping this mattress and beautiful like bed sheets.
Yeah.
And then they become this specialized class and who was actually worse than the human master. And that's the irony of it.
Mm.
They overthrew this human master in the idea of a perfect equality of outcome and paradise. They created a system that completely taking advantage of the lower class.
Mm-hmm.
And all these animals believing that if they worked hard one more day, they are going to get a beautiful retirement because that's what the ruling class promised these animals.
Yeah.
And of course, when the time comes of them retiring, they get butchered and get killed.
Mm.
So there's no digging in the system. So that really shows the promise of this good intention of like equality of outcomes.
Right.
It's gonna always bring a horror to all of us.
Mm.
And it's gonna give a rise to a special group that's gonna take advantage of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why right now in America, the exact same plot is playing, right? This group in the American elite telling American people, look at how horrible billionaires are.
Yeah.
Look at the corporations. They are so evil. And we need to overthrow them. We need to take their money. We need to tax them 99%. And if we do that, we're going to give it to you all. And you guys get the universal income, free healthcare, free education. We are going to take care of you all.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that's not what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to bring a literally death of millions of people in America.
Mm-hmm.
And that plot is always playing in every communist countries. That promise of utopia, promise of equity, what it can bring it to a society. That's what we need to learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Speaking of American elites, you do talk about this at the very beginning of your book, how when you were going around, I think you had done the TED Talk, but you had some opportunities to, I think was it with Jeff Bezos, from some very high prominent people. You met Jeff Bezos, Harvey Weinstein, kind of when he was still before the whole Me Too thing movement blew up, from my understanding. And you saw people who initially were touched by your story, but then when you began to actually bring up the solution, people had sort of a change of heart, per se. Can you bring us into that if you could?
Yeah. So in my book, there's a chapter about the hypocrisy of American elite. And I think two events that was really stuck with me is one, actually, is like what you said, Jeff Bezos had this like a off the record private event that he brings people who are interesting, the billionaires, mover shakers, the producers and Hollywood writers come there. And somehow he saw my speech that I gave once before, and then he invited me to this gathering. And then he flew me from New York on a Gulfstream private jet with Harvey and some other very famous people that I still don't know who they are. And then I go to this event, and then this is like actually not that like long before the Me Too. Harvey would give a speech, and everybody stand up giving a standing ovation, call him the man, the legend, the hero. And everybody was respecting Harvey Weinstein so much. I thought like this guy must be a saint, right? Everybody standing there trying to hold his hands.
Yeah.
And then I share my story, and Jeff Bezos was in tears, and he was asking me, what kept me going? And I said, like, my father. And I said later, like, there's a way to, like, you guys have all the platforms and influences. You work with China. Please, like, let the world leaders know that China is responsible for this crisis. That we need to convince China to support the human rights and the rights of Northern people. And they were like just looking at me as if I'm some like a Martian coming from different planet. They say, like, I care what you went through, but please don't tell anybody that I know you, that we met, that we are friends. And they were even afraid to be associated with me once they found out that I was exposing China's Communist Party. And then these same people was every day putting those black squares on their, Instagram and Twitter handles and saying the slavery is evil, the American system is horrible.
Oh, when they did
And
the blackout after George Floyd?
Yeah, of course they
Yeah,
do
I remember
that.
that.
They're denouncing slavery, denouncing hate, the police violence, and yeah, there are people in from North Korea in China, their organs are harvested out of them.
Right.
And these people will not want to stand up for the same tragedy.
Mm.
So, and then of course, okay, the Me Too blew up, right? And I called these people like, did you know that Harvey was harassing women? I was like,
Right.
of course we knew. Did you not know? And then the same people who were accusing him during the Me Too of sexual violence, those actresses were in the same spot with the Jeff Bezos event and giving him a standing ovation.
Right.
They would only choose to stand up justice when it's convenient, when there is actual no price to pay, and only thing they gain is the recognition and fame.
Right.
So I lost my faith in American elite. And last thing was when I met Nancy Pelosi in New York. There was like all of these people are always having these off the record dinners, right?
Yeah.
And all these billionaires and tycoons come, and New York Times editors and coming too.
You said Nancy Pelosi?
Yeah, Nancy Pelosi.
Okay.
And then there's a lot of traders and hedge fund tycoons in New York comes. Yeah. And then she was saying, tomorrow morning you need to get ready because I'm going to announce the impeachment of Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what this means? You need to get ready. And I was thinking, what does this mean on earth? How on earth does this mean? Which means markets unfold tomorrow morning when this news comes out. So you need to short the market. Mm-hmm. And I lost my words. Like this lady always talking about how she's fighting for the people of, who are marginalized in the society, aiding billionaires and hedge fund managers in New York City and telling them how she's going to announce this in the morning in DC. Right. And that is it. I don't know if that's not insider trading, what it is. Like what is insider trading and her husband apparently running a trading firm too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I think Andrew, what are your thoughts, man?
Yeah. I mean, the Bible says that the mercy of the wicked is cruel. And it's looking to exercise capital gain off the suffering in backs of others. And talking about kind of like with when you were bringing up Animal Farm, I love how you said earlier that the government exists to be the servant of the people. Well, it tells us that in actually Romans 13, that the government is given to us by God to be a servant of God. And the word that's used in the Greek is to be a deacon, one that is supposed to serve people. But what happens is when people don't actually have a standard in terms of how the government should exist, it'll actually not exist in the way that it should exist given to us by God. So Jesus, it says he's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. It's like the mistake in Animal Farm is the animals thinking that they can overthrow a man. Well, there's someone above the man, and his name is Jesus. So even if you overthrow the man, you still have to answer to Jesus, and he actually judges nations in the present. So when nations aren't operating the way Scripture says nations should operate, judgment does follow. And that's the reality. So like with Nancy Pelosi or Jeff Bezos or any of these people, it's like, well, how can we get through to these people? I think that the gospel is actually the answer, because in order to love your neighbor, truly, you first actually have to be in a relationship with your Savior. And the only way that can happen is through someone being told, look, it's not your whiteness that makes you guilty before the one and holy God. It's the fact that we're born sinners. We're born sinners. We're born people that want to have a knowledge of good and evil, but we don't actually have the wisdom to discern between the two, right? So we do what is wrong and right in our own eyes. We see that all throughout Scripture. But then we actually have Jesus who comes, who's God in the flesh, who dies on the cross for our sins, and he was perfect and sinless. And it's solely just through faith in him that we can stand right before God. And it says in the Scriptures that our hearts of stone are taken out and they're replaced with the heart of flesh, right? And then it says in the Proverbs that the fear of the Lord is actually the beginning of wisdom and knowledge. So it's a humility of ourselves to say, look, we don't know how to do this perfectly, but we actually have a beautiful and amazing God who condescended and gave us his law in the Bible that we could follow so that we can actually have a nation and a society that can actually flourish. So what we find now, at least in our society, is we have people who are standing on on the backs of giants, right? Like they're standing on the word of God and the blessings that we've inherited from our nation. And now they're spitting in the face of God and they can't live according to that standard. So they think instead of just coming to faith with God, that they have to repent of their whiteness or white privilege. There's like this massive confusion that exists within our society. They're repenting to the wrong God, right? The Bible says that those who search after idols, they'll become just like their idols. And we're seeing that actually happen today. Like, how can we, I guess here's the question I'm asking. So how can we rehumanize like the North Korean people to the United States population? Because I know for me, when I watched documentaries like from Vice or other people that have gone inside North Korea, like they're trying to expose what's going on there. But what it almost does in a sense is it makes you terrified of actually the people in North Korea. So how can we rehumanize this population here so our hearts can break for them to actually make the biggest difference? What do you think, Yeonmi?
I think when it comes to like looking at North Koreans are marching and, you know, like looking like robots, they are really dehumanized in the media. And it's true, a lot of them are brainwashed. But what we should not fear is lie. Right? Lie doesn't have any power. Like when I came to America, that's when I learned, like all my life, I believed that Americans were cold-blooded reptiles who are monsters. And they come to America. First thing that I saw at the Houston airport was this guy in his hoodies with his son eating big chips of bags and just big smile. Americans are smiling so much, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking, of course, these are not monsters. These are lovely people. And that fear just went away. So also the things that we are seeing from these documentaries are the people who have to do that. Like they have to praise the dictator like almost, you know, like sensational way because that's the only way they survive. And when it comes to really meet people one-on-one without the government, they are human beings just like us. And no matter the brainwashing, if it's a lie, that will lose power. And I think that's what it is that North Korean people are ready to be joining the world and be free country, but the dictator wouldn't let them. And that's why every year they use bullets to control people. They use the wire fences and concentration camp to control people because it's people really want to be free.
Right.
And imagine how many people are standing up. That's why there's hundreds, thousands of concentration inmates who are Christians, who are, you know, who want to be free. And they end up in the concentration camps. So I think what we need to worry about is really removing this force that's sustaining this regime, that is Chinese Communist Party. And if we expose them, if we hold them accountable, and if they change the direction one day, okay, we are not going to sponsor this dictatorship that does not want North Korean people to even be fed. They can literally choose a government that is willing to feed the nation's people and then still somehow hold the communist ideology like China. Right? Like they can do that. Like you can still have complete control over people and then just feed them some food. But even that they're denying because they're so evil. And we can at least ask China to do that. Like, okay, maybe we cannot ask to remove Kim Jongun, but at least can you make sure that this much food is going to the people?
Yeah. Yeah, I think what's also just interesting too when you talk about, you know, really humanizing, and I appreciate all that you just said there, is that I think even people who live in communist countries, like I said, Andrew and I were both Christians. We believe that people, you know, people have the individual, like the unique individual human dignity, value, and worth all come from a Christian worldview. But I really think that people insatiably, we have the law of God written in our heart, so that desire for freedom. You see the difference between like East and West Germany with the Berlin Wall, while people would literally risk their lives and would die constantly by trying to escape over that wall. And this the insatiable freedom when Ronald Reagan said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall," you know, and and that happened. You know, you just think about the very first time I saw an election taking place in Iraq, in Operation Iraqi Freedom. Like you just see the insatiable desire for people, not only for freedom, but to not live by lies. I mentioned earlier, I just watched the final episode of Chernobyl with my wife last night. The part that was very intriguing for me is when the engineer who is really explaining the mathematics and the science and the nuclear physics behind Chernobyl and what actually happened like during the trial, it was just, you saw his absolute like commitment for the truth, but he knew it would just come at this cost. And I think honestly, and you can maybe give your thoughts on it, 'cause I feel like you have some really unique insight here. I think it's honestly, there has to be a precedent where you have to believe in the truth and hold to it no matter what the consequence is. I think Jordan Peterson did that when he stood his ground, and you see where he is now. Yeah, I think it's an insatiable desire to stand for the truth. In fact, have you ever heard of Francis Schaeffer?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, Francis Schaeffer is he was a Christian philosopher. He wrote a lot just on the relationship between how a Christian should interact with the state. You should definitely, there's a book called A Christian Manifesto.
You should send it to her.
Yeah, we could send it to your assistant. I think
we'll send it to you.
Yeah, we'll send it to you. But I think one of the things he says is, if a Christian is called to be a missionary in a totalitarian society, he must preach the gospel and preach the truth, if necessary, suffer the consequences. So even like here in America, just with Nancy Pelosi said like doing that, where she's going to short the market after she impeached Trump. The Bible talks a lot about how economically, how unjust weights and measures are an abomination to the Lord. So I think even as a Christian, like I would have a responsibility to preach out against this, just because those decisions are affecting the average working person and working family, just this insider trading. So I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot that comes with that. But yeah, what do you think about all that?
Yeah, I think I think that's for sure. Like what she does, when there's no truth, the world is very horrible place.
Yeah.
I think that's what Dr. Pearson says, by telling the truth, you make the world a better place. I truly believe that. Nothing else matters when there's no truth. So because of that, when all these politicians lie after lies and lie after lies, and at this point, we kind of expect them to even lie.
Yeah.
And that's how we got so comfortable with these lies. Because you realize that's like expectation that of course the politician is gonna lie, and that becomes like when you don't fear the Lord. I think that's what it is. You become the master of yourself and your ego, and you don't serve anybody, and it's just your own greed and ego.
Yeah.
And society does get corrupt that way. So I think I do like those sympathetic to the people who are atheists, but I still think that those people can still value the truth same degree that Christians do. Right? If a society agrees that truth really matters, the transparency matters, then we will not have all these problems right now. But there's now the teachers, professors telling truth doesn't matter, it's your feelings.
Right.
However you feel, that's the truth, right? And then everybody's confused.
Right.
The anarchy begins.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's another book I would definitely recommend you check out. Your book made me think of it. So there's a book by someone named Eric Hoffer called The True Believer. And it's called Thoughts on the Nature of Mass Movements. So it's really about how people get radicalized and how group thinks start. And, one of the things is he talks about if I can find the quote here by Eric Hoffer with A True Believer, is he basically says, let me see if I can find it here. Oh yeah, so it says, it is the sacred duty of the true believer to be suspicious. He must be constantly on the lookout for saboteurs, spies, and traitors, where everyone's always looking to each other to rat each other out, right? And you see this with wokeism, like for example, where if you say the wrong word or if you tweet the wrong thing like 10 years ago, people go after you, and it's your time. It's your turn to be canceled. Like you're the latest sacrifice, right? It is sort of like a weird pseudo religion. Yeah, I think this. What do you think about when it comes to like that aspect of the radicalization of people spying on each other? You saw that with the KGB in Chernobyl, like that was portrayed. You had that in North Korea, where if someone said anything maybe that was not in the favor of the supreme leader, they would probably
America.
Yeah. Yeah, COVID. If you're not wearing a mask or if you are not social distancing, you saw that. I don't know, like how do you, from your perspective, give your thoughts on that, and how do we address all that?
I think this is where it comes down to where, like, I was thinking about a long time, why does the North Korean regime remove the word love from us?
Yes.
Because ultimately, the meaning of life, the purpose of life all come from love. We exist to love, right? And when you remove that love, you need to replace that with something and give to people something. And then they give things like this, like hate and anger. And when I go to Colombia, they said, stay angry, stay outraged. And I'm like, you're living the best country in human history. What do you mean stay angry? So look at all this injustice. Look at all this systemic racism. Stay angry. And what communist countries does is that hate, distrust, destruction. And when you come to a nation that loves God, they say, love your neighbors, love yourself, love your God, love your children, love your parents, and also coming from forgive, forgive and like be grateful, be joyous. The complete different message. And even not as a Christian, you can completely see that one coming from love, God come from light, one come from darkness.
Yeah.
This is evil's work. When everybody keep telling you stay angry and hate and distrust and destroy, like dismantle the system. I mean, destroy the constitution. Like this is evil's doing, right?
Yeah.
So that's why whenever you go, this is a Marxist and socialist countries, they don't talk about love. They talk about destroying the revolution. And now in America, this country does not have any mercy. Like you said, in cancel culture, what I was arguing in my book is that like we have a right to be wrong with our opinions. I have a right to change in my mind and like move on from it. Like there's no way we're gonna know everything at this moment in the perfect way. So if people made a mistake in the past, we should forgive them. And that's what God taught us, right? Forgive. And this culture is like not letting you forgive in any way. Like you gotta punish them.
Yeah.
Because they made a mistake. There's no redemption. There's no mercy. Just punishment. Pure brutality.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, there's another quote from The True Believer by Eric Hoffer, and he talks about the radicalization. And this is something I really identify with what you just said. Eric Hoffer says in his book, The True Believer, it says, hatred is the most accessible and comprehensive of all the unifying agents of a true believer. Mass movements can arise and spread without a belief in a God, but never without a belief in a devil. Well, how do you what are your immediate thoughts upon hearing that quote? How do you resonate with that?
Of course, every socialist revolution began with that hatred, right? The hatred for things. And it was never about self-responsibility of what you can do as an individual to make a difference.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it's very, in America was a friendly country. I don't think people were yelling at each other because you're not wearing your mask properly.
Right.
People would not yell at each other. Like I remember I come to America in the beginning, I was like, people saying, hello, how are you? Like, why are they interested in how I'm doing? I was so curious. Like in other countries, nobody cares how you're doing, right? They don't ask, how are you to you.
Right.
And in Korea, actually, how are you doesn't exist.
Right.
Because people don't care about you. Why they ask, how are you there?
Right.
And now, living through the pandemic, I was in Chicago. People are angry at you for everything. And you just even a little bit of cough, sneezing, just looking at you as if I'm like murdering them or something.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Can I share you a story real quickly about? All of us had a story with dealing with something weird during COVID, where this defies a logical sense. So I was going to get coffee with a friend of mine. I was meeting up to get lunch with a friend of mine, but I wanted to go just get some espresso. I'm kind of a coffee snob, so I wanted to get a shot of espresso. And I went to this one place right by where I live, and this whole place, this restaurant, is a vegan restaurant, but they had a little coffee shop. Everything was shut down. The only thing they had was a little walk-up window where you could walk up and do takeout. So, and again, so this window, it's the way I access the window, I'm on a public sidewalk. And so I'm on the public sidewalk and I'm looking at this lady who's inside. She's wearing a mask. There's almost like the pseudo face shield in front of her. And I'm just sort of looking at the menu and she's looking at me like she's terrified of me. And I'm just trying to like, oh, hi, how you doing? I'm just looking at the menu. And she asked me, says, can you wear a mask, please? I'm like, no, I'm outside of your restaurant. I'm on a public sidewalk. I'm just looking at your menu. And she was insistent that I have to wear this mask. And it made no sense to me because I'm on the outside of the restaurant. And it wasn't like I was trying to fight her because I gave a point. I'm like, I'm just not going to fight this war with people who believe this stuff for now. It was like she was insistent. And it was almost like this 2 + 2 = 5 moment for me where it was like, I can't do this, you know, and I felt sorry for her. I just had to walk away and give up on my order. So I had to give up on that espresso, but it was such a strange time, like both in, you know, you look at how people reacted to COVID, but then like with George Floyd, talk about that. 'Cause you were in Chicago. That was kind of like Chicago does have that reputation of being a violent city in many ways. Talk about that, the interaction that took place, because that was sort of inspirational for writing your book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you said, like I was living through the pandemic, and until then, I was really not out as a classical liberal at all. I was, still my agent was telling me, "Don't talk about this stuff. You're gonna get cancer. You have to like hide it." And then I was in the pandemic time. I had a son who I was sending to daycare. He would put a mask up until here 8 hours a day. And then they literally opened the strip clubs next door. And then I tried to take my son to a park playground in the summer of Chicago, like outside.
Yeah.
And there's nobody around. I'm trying to go to playground. Playground is locked. But right next door, the dog parks is open. The dog owners can go to dog park and dogs run around and they can talk to each other. But humans, with a human baby, we cannot enter the park. I was thinking, you guys treat animals way better than human child right now.
Yeah.
Like in North Korea, they treat cows way better than humans because cows are owned by collective farming by the government. So if we humans eat the cow, we get executed, not the cows.
Wow.
So I was thinking, human, like child, because they cannot speak for themselves, like you lock up the playground and you're gonna let the dog park open that humans go in there anyway. There's no common sense on it. But one day I was walking on a Mission Avenue in the day broad light and I was getting robbed by several Black women. And it's okay, anybody can be a thief. The people that raped me, they were Asians. Everybody can be a racist. It's not about race thing. And I got robbed and I was getting punched, I was getting beaten, and I was trying to call the police on these criminals. And people circling me on the street and telling me that I'm a racist because they said the person of color, skin color does not make them a thief. And I'm a bigot because I'm trying to call the cops on these thieves. And there I was suddenly people just attacking me that I'm a racist. And that's when I thought, in this country gone way too far. When I was at Columbia, I thought like this is a classroom thing. Once these people graduate from university, going into real world and start paying taxes, they're gonna come to their own reality, right? That's how we view usually. Okay, that you can be crazy in college and maybe once you graduate, you learn the life responsibility, you're gonna be fine. But this madness so gone deep that this is like the madness of the crowd. People lost their ability to see the facts. And all they saw was that I cannot be a victim because I'm an Asian. And these women who were robbing me cannot be a criminal because they are victims. They're oppressed people. So I thought that I need to, America does not have that much time left to turn this back.
Yeah.
And I think people living in America usually think that somehow revolution begins with every one of us become radicalized. That's not how it happens.
Mm-hmm.
If the main institutions get radicalized enough, then they can start the revolution. It's called the hotspot. So most of the revolutions does not begin because 100% of the people agreed. Usually people in the position of the power, and they think that they need to start a new revolution, they start it. And the American Revolution, our cultural revolution began, and it's just a silent one. And of course, we don't put people on the firing spot, but they lose their jobs.
Yeah.
They lose their livelihood. They get attacked on the streets, right? And people don't understand that we are living through our moment of revolution right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also, this would go either way, but it only really takes a small amount of people to make a significant difference. I actually I just found out about this the other day. Actually, I'm just curious because, I mean, in your studies, you read a lot about American history, right?
Yeah.
Who's your favorite president?
I mean, so many.
Or just one that comes to mind. It can be anyone. It can be anyone.
The recent memory is definitely Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan?
And of course the Lincoln. I mean, America has so many great presidents. So I mean, of course George Washington. I mean, he's just the man of character, right? He set the tone for this nation. So I think that's how America is so blessed that we had incredible leaders in the country. Yeah.
So I just found this out. Speaking of George Washington, and you think about the Revolutionary War, I just found this out that it was only really 3% of all the colonies in America that participate, the population of the men that actually fought in the Revolutionary War at that time against the most powerful empire in the world. So it only really makes a really small amount to make a difference. And so I think
3%?
It was like 3% of the end. Yeah. Crazy. I just found that off. And I grew up being obsessed with the Revolutionary War. I grew up around pre-internet. I had encyclopedias and I had the library. Yeah. So I would get everything that I could on the Revolutionary War. But yeah, it wasn't like every man called to arms. You're looking at roughly 3% of the population that participated in the American Revolution. It's pretty wild. And thinking about now, this is the country where we're still relishing in those freedoms. Let me ask you this, because one, this has been such an honor to be able to talk to you. I mean, I remember I never imagined, the very first time I listened to you, and again, jaw was on the floor just hearing your whole story, and when you were talking on Joe Rogan, then on Lex Fridman, Jordan Peterson, that one, me and Andrew would even have an opportunity to talk to you. And what can because a lot of times people will look at what's going on and they don't really have your story. And you think about China is a big country, and most people who listen into your story, I mean, most people aren't a super elitist. They're not a Jeff Bezos. They're just the average person doing their day-to-day life. What do you think, what can that person do to this? Because if you look at the huge picture and even your story and all that we talked today, it feels overwhelming. But we all have to start somewhere. Where do you think that is?
It's actually, it's was a butterfly effect, the small ripple effect, right? All individuals do little things in our lives. It can make a lot of difference, especially if you're a parent, you need to choose the right textbooks for your children.
Yeah.
And tell them the value of freedom, the price of freedom, and the meaning, what it means to be an American, what it means to become a citizen of a free country, right?
Yeah.
And that's one way changing the world, literally. And if you're somebody in college and going to college, you can talk to your classmates. If they say capitalism is evil, okay, let's talk about why do you think capitalism is so evil? Let's talk about it. And you don't have to get angry at them or shout at them, but you can gently with love and talk to them.
Right.
If in your entire 4 years of college, if you were able to convert one person and at least made them to think differently once about capitalism and free democracy, you made a difference.
Yeah.
And when you vote, of course, we have power as a voters in America. We can elect people who recognize the threat of CCP in free countries, right? It's the threat of China is not just for North Koreans, it's for the world right now. We are dealing with China. And America is the only superpower have the resources stand up against China. Like no other country has a bigger economy than America, and China's a second. So like nobody's capable of doing that. Even the EU get united, they don't have that power. So really, America is the only one can hold China on check. And that's why it's American people's job to hold them accountable, right? So that's why Trump did an excellent job raising that awareness in American minds of the threat of China. He really made that to a light, and more people was able to see how China was cheating when it comes to trading with America, with the world. They were like complete gangsters.
Right.
And we cannot get bullied by this horrible like party. And so you can elect the right leaders, and we can raise the conscience of the people and talk about it. You can share on social media. If you are, I don't know, a business person, you can support this like non-profit organizations that's spreading the word of truth and gospel. And if you are somebody who doesn't have a lot of resources, you can volunteer.
Yeah.
So it all goes back to that self-responsibility.
Yeah, self-government.
Self-government, that it's your responsibility to raise your children in the right way, and yourself, take care of your body and your mind. And a lot of people think that somehow changing the world is like the massive thing, and sometimes it begins with making your bed, like what Jordan Peterson talks about. It really does.
Yeah.
When you get your house in order, like if you cannot even govern your own home, how dare you trying to change the world?
Yeah,
right?
I can say as a newly married man, making your bed in the morning makes all the difference in the world, because it starts your day with a happy wife versus a wife saying, "Could you make your bed?" and kind of being upset.
Yeah.
So I'm learning about that as a newly married man. So I would agree with you. I agree with that philosophy by Jordan Peterson a lot. You got to start somewhere.
Yes, that's so little. Yeah.
Yeah. Andrew, what are other questions? What are some final thoughts you have for Yeonmi as we wrap up here?
Yeah. I just want to encourage you, Yeonmi, that Romans 8:28-30 says, God works all things together for good for those who love God, for those who are called according to his purpose. That means everything in your life, whether we understand it right now or not, even the suffering that we go through, God is the one who will always do what is right, and he is the God of justice, and justice will occur for the wrongs that were committed in your life and for others. Even if we don't see it right now, God is both the just and the justifier. And speaking to what, Jerry, you were talking about earlier, it was only 3% of the American population that went in the revolution. I think we see that all throughout Scripture, right? We have Moses leading Israel out of Egypt. It was just Moses and Aaron leading 3 million people to go across the Red Sea. God always makes massive movements out of small amounts of people, like Gideon, 300 men versus 120,000. As long as we are doing what is right, what God tells us we're supposed to be doing, God will be there with us and bless us for it. And that's something that we need to understand in our nation today. We can fight against the dead gods of this world as much as possible, but if we're not doing it in the light of the gospel and the truth that God has given us, we can't expect God to bless us in our endeavors. And that's a fundamental reality of the world, because Jesus Christ is King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and he is judging things in the present. So we want to do things in such a way where we can honor God, to love our neighbor, regardless of what happens to us or how many of us there are, right? Like 12 disciples, let's say minus Judas, and the gospel changed the world 2,000 years ago. Like that's a fundamental reality. All of the significant advancements we have in this world come from the backs of those who went and preached the gospel to the Romans and were impaled on stakes, eaten by lions. Like this is a reality of what happened historically in the world. And now the world has changed because of it. God always does mighty works out of small amounts of people. Even the most people that are the most oppressed, like it says all throughout the Proverbs and the Psalms, that God is for those people. So what we need to do is we need to be faithful to love our neighbors, first starting with our self-government in our local nation, and then expanding that to the world. Like these North Koreans, man, they need Jesus. They need Jesus, because it's Jesus who is the one that will set the captives free. And he has people there. He says, I have sheep that are not of this fold, referring to specifically the Jews in Jerusalem at this time, but meaning that there's sheep of Jesus's all across the world, and he cares about them. That means they're there in North Korea as well. Like you said, Yeonmi, there's people that are being executed right now for being Christians. Well, Jesus cares about that. And although we see massive amounts of suffering in this time, I take hope in God's word by saying that one day I know North Korea will be overthrown by the power of the gospel and those people will be set free. But that's what I got to keep my hope in, right? Like these are altogether, I'm a creationist, so I believe that we all come from Adam and Eve. So the people in North Korea, I understand, are also my relatives, distant as much. So it breaks my heart to hear that people that I am related to, though very distant, are being killed for things that are, it's just absolutely ridiculous. So my hope is in Jesus and the power of the gospel and us taking things captive by the word of God so that he can break the hearts of stone, turn them into hearts of flesh to cause them to want to love their neighbors. So I want to encourage you with that, Yeonmi, especially in your life and what you're going through today in America, and even standing up for what you believe in New York City of all places. Like that's a place that is extremely leftist compared to I'm in Utah. That's even more conservative than Arizona. We start calling Arizona Utah's Mexico border now because of the recent election. So I want you to encourage you to continue to stand on the truth, to stand on God's word, to shine the light of his word into the nation, because it's God's word that does the convicting of hearts, because he is the creator of heaven and earth and the hearts, even the ones that beat against him. So I just want to encourage you with that.
Oh.
Yeah. Thank you again. Just a question again. And like I said, I think, we were talking about just like truth. And I think one of the things too is that even the idea of like freedom of speech, that underlying comes from a Christian worldview. So I think one of the best ways to practice what I preached is to give you, a voice to express yourself. And I think your message is so incredibly important. Question for you, Yeonmi, like where you're doing the book tour now, this is your second book. Like, what does the future look like for you? Do you see yourself writing more books? I don't know. Would you entertain like running for like public office? Or do you just see yourself involved like in more in like human rights? I mean, like I said, whether it's for, fighting for those who are, less people with just people who are discriminated against. I don't know. What does the future look like for you? Where do you see yourself in the next 2 to 5 years? Do you have any ideas of what that looks like for you?
Yeah, for the next 2 years, definitely no plan to write another book. I think maybe every 7 years, fine.
Yeah,
I don't
every
think I'm
7
that
years.
fast.
That's a good biblical number. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to, I don't have a lot of ideas to write another one that quickly.
Uh-huh.
But I enjoying writing these things down and, think. I love thinking now and think critically also. But I always know that there was a reason why I got rescued by those Christian missionaries. And there's only 209 of us in America from North Korea that made it in the last 80 years. So I have a obligation not to forget my past and my people, and I still believe in humanity. I really think that if I let the world know what's happening, and not just the leaders, corrupt leaders, but the average people know, I do think that they will join me in demanding justice for North Korean people.
Wow.
And that's my hope. Like if I convert one person, that's enough, right? So that advocacy work until my last breath, it will not end. I will fight for North Korean people until I die.
Okay.
But besides that, I don't ever think I'm gonna run for office for that because I think there's a lot of smarter people who can do better job. But I mean, my job is really, be a good mother, be a good daughter, be a good neighbor. And I work with a lot of nonprofit organizations already. So like I'm on the board of Human Rights Foundation, and we work with a lot of dissidents from all around the world and people who are suffering under tyranny. And we try to free as many people as we can. But it's a long game for sure. So there's a lot to fight against right now in the world.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's one of the most important things is not to get overwhelmed, but just what can you do right now and just really just speak what you believe is the truth. So I think that's a really good thing. So again, it's been, Yeonmi, I know we're going maybe a little bit overboard, but again, this has been just an absolute honor to be able to speak with you. I think you have such an amazing story. It really I walked away the very first time I heard you. It was in my mind for days. Your initial conversation that I heard, and I your story is without significance. So I would just encourage you, keep on boldly, talking about the truth and the evils of communism and these oppressive states. Because I take what I have, my freedom, for granted so much, and even talking to you now is just such a refresher that I can't take anything for granted. You think about, I'm thinking a lot too about the world I want my children to grow up in. You've resonated. I really resonate with that too. So again, thank you so much. I am going to try, what I want to do actually, as we wrap up, I want to make sure I want to send you those books, by Francis Schaeffer and Eric Hoffer. I think I think you would just enjoy them. So I'd love to give those to you as a gift. I'll reach out to your assistant and do all that. So
Thank you.
Yeah. All that being said, do you have any final thoughts or anything like that as we wrap up here, just with the conversation? Any last words you'd like to say to our audience?
Oh, I think I'm just grateful for you guys for having me. And also, I think for everybody, it's so sad when I meet a lot of people that feel like they're losing hope,
Yeah.
and the despair is really on both sides. But we have a lot to be hopeful for. Yeah.
Yes.
We still have so much more than anybody can ever have in the world. And Americans are really blessed because of the prosperity, I don't know, God gave to us, really. I never thought human beings were able to have this much stuff. And we do have that much stuff with us.
Yes.
And so I think not losing hope and not getting overwhelmed. Just take one day, one step at a time. And we just go with the gratitude and with the conviction and hope and love. And then life is beautiful all over again. I think that's the thing. When people keep saying, how are you not traumatized? Why are you so normal? And we are, in America, they expect you to be a victim and not functioning very well after go through something horrible thing happen to you. And almost the society expects you to perform less. And we should believe that we are very strong. Humans are amazing. We can overcome so many difficulties.
Yeah.
So have that faith in us that I think we are fine.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, again, this has been an absolute privilege, honor to be able to speak with you. Do wish Godspeed with you, all the best. Again, if you want to check, if anyone, I would definitely check out her Yeonmi Park's latest book, While Time Remains, and then also your initial book, your initial memoir, which is In Order to Live. That really explains a lot more in detail. Both books are fantastic and excellent, so you can definitely check those out. All right, all that being said, thank you all for listening in. This has been a great, insightful conversation. Would love to hear your thoughts on this conversation. Go ahead and comment on our social media. Let us know what you thought. All that being said, we will talk to you all next time on Cultish. Talk to you all next week.